Bruno is a deep learning developer working at the MERIDIAN project at the Institute of Big Data Analytics, Dalhousie University. His main research topic consists of developing solutions to the problems of data scarcity when training deep learning models, as well as developing acoustic detectors for marine mammals. So please take it away.
Thanks. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Right. All right. So I'm going to talk about a tool that we developed here at MERIDIAN. Call it an adaptable open source deep learning North Atlantic right whale vocalization detection tool. This tool was done in collaboration with Wilfred Besling and Claire Evers from DFO, and also Jim Theriot from Ocean Environmental Consulting. And I'm also going to give a brief overview of some other projects that we have here at MERIDIAN that are related to this topic. So basically, why use deep learning for marine bioacoustics? I think, by now we already have a lot of reasons from the other presenters, but just to reinforce, these deep learning models, as opposed perhaps to conventional machine learning models, they are easily scalable and they are adaptable, for example, using transfer learning like Emma said in her presentation. And most importantly as well, these models, they usually perform better the more data we feed to them. And in addition, as previous talks already said, these deep learning techniques, they do not require this feature extraction, manual feature extraction from the data. So this feature extraction step is incorporated into the multiple layers of this neural network. So basically, the model learns the best features that it can learn for this particular problem. And there have been many studies by now on deep learning for marine mammal detection. And I think we're past this point of novelty. I think we can say that deep learning works and is already a well-established technique with proven results. However, most studies in deep learning are rather application specific, and most importantly, few works actually present a software tool that is necessary to not only reproduce the results from these studies, but also apply these models to different acoustic environments and data sets, and also make it accessible to people that perhaps do not have programming knowledge. And this is essentially what we try to do here. We developed this command line tool to facilitate the creation of deep learning based acoustic detectors and classifiers, here specifically for North Atlantic right whales vocalizations, but we also intend to expand in the future to other species and even other type of data. So our main objectives with this tool was to make it open source and have simple commands, so be easy to operate with a flexible workflow, have a fully documented examples, and most importantly, it does not require knowledge of programming. And essentially, this tool is separated into 5 modules, or I call them modules. We have database creation, we have training a model, test a model, run a model, and finally adapt a model. So more or less what you would expect from the pipeline of creating a detector. And each one of these 5 modules, they can be used individually. So for example, if you already have a trained model, you can just use the part of the tool that runs the model on a directory of audio files, or they can be used in conjunction, in combination with each other to produce the model from scratch. We also made available a trained neural network that was trained on data from the Canada's and US East Coast. And we make this model available as a basis for more tailored detectors. And the idea here is this model that we provide, and we do plan to expand it to different architectures and different species. But what this model we provide is for not necessarily the best possible model, but rather a model that performs reasonably well and that can be used right off the bat to make detections. And with the detections, perhaps, like Vol talked about, use this model itself to improve, to generate detections, validate the detections, use these validated detections to feed into the neural network again, and improve the performance of this classifier little by little. And everything here was implemented with Keras, which is our in-house deep learning package. And essentially, so here's just give an idea of where exactly this command line 2 stands. To the left here, so research papers, TensorFlow, Keras, all of these tools often require some sort of programming knowledge to operate on. So they are not exactly easy to use. And to the more that we write, more to the right here as we go, it's progressively easier to use. So our command line tool, it does require some knowledge of the command line interface, both in Windows and Linux or whatever operating system you use. But it operates on just simple commands rather than having to write actual code for it. But even easier would be to use a graphical user interface, like we saw in the previous presentations. For example, a web platform or an actual desktop application to operate on the data. However, usually the easier these applications are, the less flexible they are, meaning that, this command line tool works for North Atlantic right whale data, but I don't know if it's going to work very well if you're trying to use a different type of data, let's say satellite data, or even a different species. However, when we're going more low level, so with TensorFlow, PyTorch, we can just build these applications from scratch. So of course, they are much more flexible. I will expand on graphical user interface further down the presentation. And this is just an example of what the tool does. The tool allows us to then take, for example, that model that we provide and simply run it on a directory of audio files. And what it will output then are a CSV file with the detections. So basically, for example, here we have a CSV file with the file names, where the detection starts, where the detection, how long did the detection occur, and a score. And this score is basically how confident the model is that this detection is actually a North Atlantic right whale vocalization. Another option of the tool is to test these trained models on annotated data. And this is quite important. These deep learning models, even though they are very good and adaptable, they can be quite sensitive to the training data. So a model that was trained in one environment, let's say North Atlantic right whale data in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, can struggle when used in a different acoustic environment. And with standard performance metrics, for example, we already heard of precision, recall, we have also confusion matrix. So these plots, they can help us predict how well our model is going to perform, and then we can fine tune it to our particular need. So for example, here we have the detection threshold showing the precision and recall as we change this detection threshold. So if we increase the threshold, we're basically telling our model, hey, it's okay if you miss a lot of detections, as long as the detections that you actually give me are correct. On the contrary, if we decrease this threshold, we're basically telling the model then, hey, just give me every detection that you can find, and it's okay if they are not right whales, I will validate them later. And finally, the last one that I will talk about is adapting the model. So basically transfer learning, like we saw in the previous presentation, which consists of then adapting this model that perhaps was trained in a different location to, or even a different species, a different task, to the task that we actually want. And for example, the model that we trained, it was trained on a couple of locations from the US and Canada's East Coast, and it won't perform well everywhere. What we expect is that people are going to use that model and then improve it to their need by simply feeding it more data, which is, I think, also one of the major benefits of deep learning. It makes these models reusable and can be shared with the community so that everyone can actually benefit from them. And we are also adding this command line option to Kata, so to the deep learning package that I talked about previously, with equivalent commands or modules. However, instead of being focused on just Northland right whale detection, we do intend to make this more generic to other models and other type of data. And upon installing Catus, these options will become available with then any compatible model. We are also intend to create individual detectors to a couple of other species. So these are, this work will be done is being done in collaboration with Bill Halliday and the Wildlife Conservation Society Canada. And for each species, for each of these individual detectors, so binary detectors, basically saying this is a bullhead whale or not a bullhead whale, or this is a beluga or not a beluga, they will provide more or less the same functionality as the North Atlantic right whale 2 that I described previously. And we also eventually want to combine all these detectors and call it, let's say, a more generic Arctic mammal detector. So be able to differentiate not only a yes or no question, but specifically tell which of these species specifically the vocalization is. Not only that, and I guess this is really the main project of Meridian, which is MAPLE, Marine Artificial Intelligence Platform, which is an actual graphical user interface that we are building for deep learning based analytical tools. So all the functionalities that I talked about previously will be integrated into this platform. And Maple eventually will have different toolboxes related to ocean sciences. The first toolbox will be the acoustic toolbox, so working with acoustic data, which will support the workflows that I previously mentioned in an open source web platform. However, we do plan, well, if we get funding as well, hopefully later on to expand this work to other types of data. So for example, satellite data. This is still under development, but we already have a few of the applications coming along. And just to, again, situate us where this tool will fall. So this tool will be more to the right here of this timeline, I guess, which will be an actual graphical user interface, which takes considerable amount of work, or more work to do than just simply building the model. So Maple already has, for example, the file management interface, and this will be like the basis for everything else, which allows the user to upload, and not only upload, but share data, and includes what the workflow actually needs. So from this, we will be able to separate files for annotation, file for training, file for creating test data sets, files for adapting the model, and so on and so forth. And finally, this is another part that is already more or less done, which will be an annotation tool to collaboratively annotate data and validate also model outputs. So this spectrogram here could have been a spectrogram without annotations that a human analyst went and annotated the data. And these annotations can then be used to train a neural network with the model. But also the contrary, it could be actually what the model output. And we're here validating the data and saying, yes, this is a killer whale call, or this is a North Atlantic right whale call, and this is correct, but this is not. And then we can use these validated detections to improve our models. And here I have a couple of links if people are interested in the command line tool, and also Catalyst itself.
All right, thank you so much for that great talk. We have a few minutes for questions before the break. So if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat. Here's one. Bruno, have you had some outside users? What has been their experience?
Yeah, so this tool was made available just a couple of weeks ago. So we did have some input yet from Wilfred from DFO, and what we're essentially asking now is not exactly to see if the tool is, well, it is if the tool is working well, but also how easy it is to use, because our intention is to make it very easy to use. We're going to very soon improve instructions on installing the tool. There were a couple of issues with that, so we're trying to make it a little bit easier on that part. But everyone is invited to use it and give us some feedback.
Would you be able to post the link to it in the chat so that we have a record of it?
That's a good idea.
Will you have instructions on how to create other detectors?
Yes, we do have already. We do already have some instructions on the project page and full-on tutorials on how to create a detector from scratch. And we do recommend, following the tutorial and seeing more or less how it works.
Any thoughts on methods for comparing performance across models, such as a future feature of Maple possibly after annotation?
Right, that's a good question. I think, I prefer plots than just numbers. I'm not entirely sure if this will be a feature of Maple. Perhaps Fabio can answer it better, but I do believe that this will actually be an included feature where, run the model on the same data, two models on the same data, and then have a comparison with different metrics and plots. Bobby, do you want to expand on that?
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And a key thing there is to have this common test data sets, I think. And that's one of the things we want to make it easier with Maple, is that people can share test sets, and then you can have multiple users with their own models, all running on the same test set, all computing the same evaluation metrics in the same way, and then you can visualize and to easily compare them. But yeah, this is very much something that Maple will support.